Have you ever met someone who seems to notice a lie almost instantly? Maybe you're talking in a group, someone tells a story, and while everyone else nods along, one person quietly raises an eyebrow. They don't interrupt, they don't argue, but you can almost see the gears turning in their head. Later they lean over and whisper, "Something about that didn't feel right," and strangely, they're often correct. It's almost like they have some kind of built-in lie detector. Now here's the interesting question. How do some people do this? Why do certain people pick up on lies, exaggerations, or fake stories so quickly, while others miss them completely? At first you might think it's intuition. Maybe it's luck. Or maybe those people are just naturally suspicious. But psychology suggests something deeper is happening inside their minds. Let me show you. Imagine two people listening to the same conversation. One person hears the words. The other hears the words, watches the facial expressions, notices the pause before a sentence, the shift in tone, the tiny moment of hesitation. Their brain is quietly collecting clues. Most of us listen to conversations like we're watching a movie. We follow the story, the dialogue, the surface of what's being said. But people who notice lies tend to watch conversations more like detectives, not in a paranoid way, just observant. They notice the details. A forced smile, a contradiction in the timeline, a story that sounds rehearsed rather than remembered. And here's the fascinating part. Research in psychology shows that humans are actually very bad at consciously detecting lies. Studies from universities like the University of California and the University of Portsmouth found that when people are asked directly to identify lies, they perform only slightly better than random guessing. Yet in everyday life, some people still pick up on deception more easily than others. Why? The answer lies in something psychologists call thin slicing. Thin slicing is the brain's ability to make quick judgments based on small pieces of information. Your brain absorbs tiny signals, tone, posture, eye movement, emotional mismatch, and processes them without you even realizing it. Think of it like background software running in your mind. Most people ignore those signals because they're focused on the conversation itself. But observant individuals, they're constantly reading the background. Imagine someone saying, "Yeah, I totally finished that project yesterday," but their eyes briefly look away. Their voice tightens slightly. The sentence feels oddly rehearsed. Individually, those signals mean almost nothing, but together, they create a strange feeling. Something's off. And people who frequently notice lies often have brains that are especially sensitive to these micro-signals. Interestingly, many of these people also tend to be highly observant in general. They notice patterns others overlook. They remember small details from conversations weeks ago. They pay attention to emotional shifts in a room. It's almost like their brain is constantly scanning for inconsistencies. But here's something even more interesting. Often, this ability comes from life experience. Psychologists have found that people who grew up in unpredictable environments, homes, where emotions were unstable, where people weren't always honest, or where social dynamics were complicated, often develop heightened emotional awareness. Their brains learn early that paying attention to subtle cues can be important for understanding what's really happening. So instead of relying only on words, they start reading people, tone of voice, body language, energy. Over time, this skill becomes automatic. They don't sit there analyzing every movement like a human lie detector machine. Their brain simply notices patterns faster than others. Think of it like someone who has listened to music for years. When a note is slightly out of tune, they hear it instantly. Other people might not notice anything wrong, but their brain goes, "Wait, that doesn't fit." Human behavior works the same way. Lies often create tiny behavioral off-notes, a story that jumps from detail to detail too perfectly, an emotion that doesn't match the words, too much explanation, or sometimes not enough. And people who frequently detect lies are simply more sensitive to those subtle mismatches. Now here's where things get complicated, because noticing lies doesn't always feel like a superpower. Sometimes it feels exhausting. Imagine constantly sensing when something feels fake, forced or dishonest in conversations. Imagine picking up on small manipulations, social masks, or half-truths that others seem perfectly comfortable ignoring. You might start feeling like the only person seeing the cracks in the wall. This is why many people who are good at detecting dishonesty also become very selective about their relationships. They value authenticity. They prefer honest conversations, even uncomfortable ones, over polite lies or fake politeness. And because of that, they might sometimes appear quiet in social situations, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're observing, watching, reading the room. Their brain is constantly collecting information. You might even notice that these people tend to ask unusual questions. Instead of following the script of normal conversation, they might suddenly ask something deeper. Wait, how did that actually happen? Or, what did you feel when that happened? And when someone lies, those questions often expose inconsistencies. But again, this isn't always intentional. It's just curiosity mixed with observation. Now here's an important truth psychology teaches us. Detecting lies isn't about catching people. It's about understanding human behavior. Because people lie for many different reasons. Sometimes they lie to protect themselves. Sometimes they lie to avoid embarrassment. Sometimes they lie because they want to look more impressive. And sometimes they lie without even realizing it, exaggerating stories to make them more interesting. The human mind is surprisingly flexible with truth. We reshape memories. We fill in gaps. We adjust stories to fit the image we want others to see. So when someone notices a lie, it doesn't always mean the other person is malicious. Often it just means they're human. And people who understand this tend to become less judgmental over time. Instead of reacting with anger, they become curious. Why did that person feel the need to lie? Were they trying to impress the group? Were they insecure? Were they protecting themselves? This shift from accusation to curiosity is something psychologists often associate with emotional intelligence, because the real skill isn't just detecting dishonesty, it's understanding the emotions behind it. And when someone develops that perspective, their ability to read people becomes much more powerful. Not in a manipulative way, but in a compassionate way. They begin to understand motivations, fears, and insecurities that others might overlook. They see the layers behind behavior. And that kind of awareness changes the way you interact with the world. You become more careful about who you trust, more patient with people's imperfections, more appreciative of the rare moments when someone is completely genuine. Because honesty, real honesty, is surprisingly rare. Think about the last time someone spoke openly about their fears, their mistakes, or their insecurities. Those moments feel different. They feel real. And people who notice lies quickly often value those moments deeply. They aren't searching for perfection in others. They're searching for authenticity, for conversations that feel real rather than scripted, for people who say what they mean. And ironically, that desire often makes them very trustworthy themselves. Because when you're sensitive to dishonesty, you usually try not to create it. You know how it feels when something doesn't add up. So you try to be straightforward, clear, honest, even when it's uncomfortable. And maybe that's the deeper lesson here. So the ability to notice lies isn't really about deception at all. It's about awareness. Awareness of human behavior. Awareness of emotional signals. Awareness of the quiet details hiding beneath everyday conversations. And once you start seeing those details, it's hard to unsee them. You begin to understand that communication is never just words. It's tone, expression, timing, emotion, silence. So if you're someone who often senses when something feels off in a conversation, you're not strange. Your brain might simply be paying attention to signals most people overlook. And that awareness, when balanced with empathy, can become a powerful tool for understanding people more deeply. But now I'm curious about you. Have you ever sensed that someone was lying before anyone else noticed? What was the moment that gave it away? Was it something they said? Or something they didn't? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, consider subscribing, because the human mind is full of fascinating mysteries, and we're only just beginning to uncover them.